Hello everyone, and welcome to another Balance Your Productivity live broadcast here every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Thank you for watching. If you're watching live, hello to you all, and if you're watching the recording, thank you, and please do share and watch any of the previous videos. As ever, if you would like to ask a question, you can do so in the comments, and if it's live, I'll keep an eye and hopefully be able to answer your questions. Or share any comments, or if you have something that you would like to ask after the show or on the recording, then again do so in the comments and I will get back to you. So in this session, the last of the rounds I've been doing around communication, I'm going to be looking at how you can say no to your boss, which is not always something that is easy to do, and how you can do it through negotiation rather than just saying straight out and out no. And this is something that comes up quite often in conversations, and actually we were discussing it in a work group yesterday, where people are often feeling that they're overloaded with work, and how do they say no to their boss or make it clear that they've just simply got too much to do and perhaps they're feeling very overwhelmed by it. So yes, of course, you're there to do a job, and your boss, your director, your manager or your team leader is the person who organises and manages your workload. But that doesn't mean that you have to accept everything that they're giving to you just because they are who they are. And this is also important when it comes to communicating with your clients and your customers. Yes, they're important, and in some respects, the customer is king, but you are there to provide a service. But that doesn't mean that you have to accept everything that they ask or everything that they want you to do. Sometimes it can be unreasonable, or they're just simply overloading you, or particularly in the case of clients, they might be working to their own time frame, which is very different from yours, or they're requesting additional work over and above what has already been agreed. And this is something that can get you into trouble further down the line if you keep just accepting the work, because you can end up doing twice as much as you'd originally agreed, and then having to either invoice them or having to swallow that cost because you just kept accepting it. So it's not always easy to say no to people in general, but it does become more difficult when it's your boss or it's somebody further up the hierarchy or in power, or it's a client. And just because you say no, it doesn't mean that you're going to lose the business or you're going to get sacked from your job, but it does show that you have confidence in what it is that you're doing. And most people will appreciate if a problem or an issue is being raised and will listen to what you have to say. So you can make a no easier by turning it into a negotiation. Communication in general is critical. They may not realise how much you're already doing unless you tell them. So that's the first piece, that you need to speak to them. You need to open that communication. In the end, it might well be their decision, especially if it's your boss, but if you don't tell them, they're not going to know there's an issue or there's a problem, or that you're already overloaded, or that you have other priorities. And if there's a valid reason for saying no or having a discussion, or is it just the case that someone has to do it? So one thing to think about is the impact of what both saying yes and saying no is going to have. For instance, it's 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and your boss, in this case, or perhaps a client, asks you to do something before the end of the day. So you have to think, is this a reasonable expectation? And what are the impact or the consequences that it has both on you and on the other tasks that you either won't be able to complete before the end of the day, or that you're not going to be able to leave on time? And perhaps you have to leave on time because you have a time critical commitment, such as picking child up from school or an appointment which just can't be cancelled. So in that instance, you want to be able to negotiate. Is it really, really important that it needs to be done by Friday? Quite often when you start asking the question, you can start to see or understand that actually perhaps you can offer to come in early on a Monday to make sure that it gets done in time. After all, there's very little that tends to happen between a Friday and a Monday other than it being a weekend. Think about what the impact is on you of taking on this additional task, what's not going to get done, and who else is potentially going to be affected. Don't make it personal. It's not necessarily about you or them. It's about getting the job done and achieving both what you need to do, your goals and objectives, but also the task relates to what's doing the best for the company or the business that you're working for. So you need to be able to raise your concerns or put forward your issues and then listen to what they have to say so that you can then both come to an agreement or make a decision about what the next best step is. Present any of the information and facts that you have and be very specific and use your facts to explain and discuss the request or what the issue or the concern is. And then you can both discuss, whether it's your boss or a client, what the best solution is based on the facts, not just you saying, I'm too busy to do it, or no, or you would actually say, no, I don't want to do it because I already have too much on, I have these other priorities. You might want to say, can I suggest another option, or can somebody else help you out on this? So you need to be able to prioritize your workload and know which of your tasks are important and when they need to be completed. So when this additional piece of work comes in, you're able to see either where it fits or where you can reprioritize, or if you can't, go back to the person and ask them to clarify. Perhaps they haven't been clear enough about what's required or when it's needed by or what the impact is. And if you need help, particularly from your boss, to reprioritize your work, then just ask. They will then at least be able to see how much you've actually got to do and that you know what you've got, how long it's going to take you, and what the potential impact is going to be. And they can then make the decision if they're not happy with what you've put forward. The key thing to be aware of here is if you just keep accepting work and saying yes the whole time, you're just adding to your workload, and you're then likely to end up working long hours to get everything done, and you won't be working as well as you could. And I know we've touched on that in a previous session, but being able to have more of a negotiation around this and opening those lines of communication is really important. You also need to be very clear with your boundaries. And again, this is something that I talked about before, and it's so important in helping you to manage your time. And if you've made things clear from the start about what you will and won't accept, and particularly around what your working hours, that perhaps you will never be able to work, or that you're not able to work after 5 p.m. on a Friday, then they know that giving you a piece of work or expecting you to do something by that time, or giving you something at 4 o'clock, 4:30, is not really acceptable. And it makes it a lot easier to then say no to somebody when they overstep those boundaries. And it's the same with clients, being very clear about what you will and won't accept, when you're available, when you will respond to things, what your set working hours are, and that you either don't want to be contacted or you won't be able to be contacted during the evenings and weekends. So if you plan to finish on time and you've been given additional work and you don't have time for, then you need to prioritize, or you need to drop something. And as I said, if you're not clear about what needs to drop or change or be renegotiated, then ask your boss to do that for you. The more you respect your time, the more others will respect you, and the less likely it is to keep happening. The person that's giving you the work to do may also not be very good at delegating. And people, particularly managers, may have a habit of dumping last-minute tasks on other people because they've run out of time to do it themselves, or they've forgotten about it, or they're just generally disorganized and they've overloaded themselves, so they give it to somebody else to do. So if you're not able to make them aware of what the impact is of doing that piece of work, and the fact that they've either given it to you late or their disorganisation has now had an impact on you, then again, you're going to keep getting that pattern of behaviour and they will keep doing it to you. So the more that you accept, the more likely you are to get more work given to you. Perhaps you get demands from other people who aren't your boss but are in a more senior position, and you don't feel happy having a conversation with them or turning down the work or saying no. At that point, you could redirect them to go and talk to your manager or your boss or senior person and get them to make the decision about whether you need to do the work. So sort of say, please, can you go and talk to my boss? And if they're happy with it, then yes, I can do that for you. But also being aware of your priorities and do you actually have time to do that? And that might be a conversation that you then want to have with your boss anyway. So if you don't feel comfortable saying no to a more senior person, then that's the way to do that, to do it through an intermediary, which tends to be the person that you report directly to, because they have a good idea of what your workload is. And if people are giving work to you, delegating work to you, be very clear that you know what's needed, the ways of having effective delegation, which again we touched on in the previous session, of being very, very clear about when something needs doing, what needs to be done by, and potentially how they would like it done, so that you're very clear when you're given this piece of work and you accept it. Perhaps you've negotiated around it, how it's going to be completed, and that it's going to be done on time. Something that is important to remember, and I think there's a very good quote around it, is when people are giving you work to do, that a lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. So that's where somebody else's lack of organisation, lack of planning, leaving things until the last minute then has an impact on you, but you don't necessarily need to then make it a priority for you if it doesn't fit in with everything else you've already got. So those are sort of few ideas on how to say no to your boss or someone in more senior position by negotiating and having a conversation and a discussion rather than actually saying an outright no. And if you find that you're constantly juggling different priorities and more getting piled on and you're not comfortable and you'd like a different way to handle it and you'd just like to have a chat about it, then do please get in touch. And also, if you think that this might be an area you can improve on, then you can take the quiz, complete the time quiz, which is on my website. There is an area that relates to some of these things. You can have a look at that as well. And if there's anything else that you would like help or support with, or you'd just like to have a chat, then do please get in touch through my website. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care and stay being productive.